My question was about abortion, and I just wanted to know, why exactly do you think a first trimester fetus has moral value?
Okay, so a first trimester fetus has moral value because whether you consider it a potential human life or a full-on human life, it has more value than just a cluster of cells. If left to its natural processes, it will grow into a baby. So the real question is, where do you draw the line? So you're going to draw the line at the heartbeat, because it's very hard to draw the line at the heartbeat. There are people who are adults who are alive because of a pacemaker. They need some sort of outside force generating their heartbeat. Okay, are you going to do it based on brain function? Okay, well, what about people who are in a coma? Should we just kill them? Right? The problem is, anytime you draw any line other than the inception of the child, you end up drawing a false line that can also be applied to people who are adults. So either human life has intrinsic value or it doesn't. I think we both agree that adult human life has intrinsic value. Can we start from that premise?
I believe that sentience is what gives something moral value, not necessarily being a human alone.
Okay, because, when you're asleep, can I stab you?
I'm still considered sentient when I'm asleep.
Okay, if you are in a coma from which you may awake, can I stab you?
Well then, no. I guess not. I mean,
I'm glad you answered that, because I have no interest in actually murdering you.
But that's still potential sentience, and it's still a potential.
I agree. It is potential sentience. You know what else is potential sentience? Being a fetus.
The issue with that. The issue I have with that, though, is that if I'm in a coma and I'm not doing anything to anyone, I'm not causing any issues amongst the world. Whereas an unwanted child may or may not be a burden to people.
Okay, well, there are lots of people who are unwanted, right? I mean, there are lots of people's parents who are unwanted, right? We're a bunch of college students. The problem is that now you're shifting the argument, right? Before you were making the argument based on the intrinsic value of a life based on sentience, and now you're talking about the level of burden that somebody presents as a separate moral argument. Okay, I don't believe that you being a burden on somebody is justification for them killing you, as a general rule.
I'll leave it at that, but I appreciate you and thank you.
Okay. Barack Obama has been terrible from beginning to end. He's divided us along racial and sexual lines. He's divided us along every line he could find. He came in with a great promise. Because the expectations for Obama were so high and he fell so short, he's really divided America. I think he's trolled the Republican Party into irrelevance, and I think that he's taken his own party to Bernie Sanders land. And I think that, he's done that through policy, but he's mostly done that through his style. When Obama was elected, there was this great hope that he was finally going to help conciliate the greatest conflict that has ever torn the nation, the racial conflict, right? And instead he came in on the basis and governed on the basis that if you oppose him, it must be because you are black. And if there are imbalances in terms of equality, that is inequity, right? Inequality equals inequity. So if more black people than white people are going to prison proportionately, that must be because people are racist. It can't just be because too many black people are committing crimes, right? So by doing that, he's divided people along these lines. And you can see it in the Gallup polls. I mean, people now feel that the racial conflict in the country is at heights it hasn't been for decades. That to me is the most damaging thing, is that he's reverted American politics to a form of tribalism that I find very scary. In terms of his actual policy, Obamacare is destroying the medical system. It's raising premiums for people who are in the system. It's going to end up with an actual form of care that really is just redistribution of care. Which is going to hurt the people who are youngest and the people who are oldest. There's a reason Ezekiel Emanuel, who designed his Obamacare program, says he wants to die at 75. They're going to end up redistributing health care, and they're going to end up restricting it. As far as the economy, his economic policies, if you look at American history, every time there's a big bust, there is then a similarly sized boom, unless you have a massive government policy like FDR and Hoover, or unless you have a massive government policy like Barack Obama. So on domestic policy, he's been terrible. He's pushed government into realms it never was before and created conflicts that weren't there before. So, for example, on the gay marriage issue, my position on this has been that the government should get completely out of the business of marriage. I think the government sucks at everything, and they suck at that too. So, what Obama has done instead is he said, okay, let's enshrine same-sex marriage for the purpose of cramming down on religious institutions the idea that they must participate in something they believe is sinful. That's not live and let live. That's live like me or I won't let you live. Right? And that's dastardly stuff. When it comes to his foreign policy is the worst of all of his policies. He set the world, I mean, it's cliche at this point, but he set the world on fire. His Libya war was a disaster and handed guns to terrorists. He talks about handing guns to ISIS. He actually did that in Libya. He talks about, Syria is a disaster area. The attempt to make Iran into a regional power with the assumption that they're going to moderate themselves is utter asininity. It's just foolishness on an unbelievable scale. His handing over of power to Russia in Crimea is going to end with NATO possibly breaking apart, because Russia's just going to continue encroaching on outlying portions of the NATO alliance, and basically say, fine, come and get me, coppers. And he's allowed the Chinese to expand their realm of influence into the South China Sea. And you're going to see increasing Chinese intransigence and aggressiveness, because China demographically this happens with every country where you have a lot more males than females. China demographically, there are 125 males for every 100 females. When you have a lot of excess young men, there's only one thing you can do with those people, and that's put them in the army. And that's basically what China has done. So they're going to get very aggressive on the world stage very quickly. So every aspect, Latin America, of course, has become a disaster too. Every aspect of this presidency has been terrible, but when you have the media on your side, and when you're a likable fellow, and he is likable on camera, then those are assets that matter. And this is why when people say, how could we end up with a reality TV show host like Trump running, he's the second one to do it. Right? Obama's the first. You don't do interviews with the lady who sat in a bathtub full of Cheerios and Fruit Loops, and then tell me about how terrible it is that Donald Trump used to be on The Apprentice. Be gender specific, and this would be the final. We can end, no more voting, no more debate. This person has the ultimate opinion, because this is the ultimate victim of this evil Western civilization that must be torn down piece by piece. And the bargain for people is pretty simple. You get to feel good about yourself even if you haven't done anything in your life. You get to feel that all of your failures are the result of a society that's seeking to victimize you. Grab a chisel and hammer away. You're part of the coalition that's going to tear down this evil civilization that has victimized you. Now, never mind that all of this is sheer bullshit. Right? Never mind that none of this makes any sense. Never mind that when people talk about white privilege, in the United States it doesn't make sense for a variety of reasons, including the fact that the majority of people on welfare in the United States are white, including the fact that the people with the highest average household income in the United States are Asian, which is weird. I mean, like, Koreans didn't write the Constitution, right? So is it Korean privilege that's causing all of this in the United States, or is it just possible that we have a free system and people who work really hard do really well in the United States under a free system? None of it makes any sense, but it makes everybody feel really good. And that feeling of victimhood is empowering to people. It's not empowering them to do anything useful. It doesn't empower them to work harder, because in fact, if they work hard and they succeed, they've actually undermined their entire argument. If they work hard and they succeed under this cruel, oppressive system that was supposed to keep them down, then how do they make the argument it's a cruel, oppressive system that was supposed to keep them down? It makes it kind of difficult. But it does give them a feeling of achievement just for being there. And the way that they protect this is by preventing anyone else from thinking or speaking. And so they use language like white privilege, and then they use the microaggression culture. Now, the microaggression culture is specifically designed to make people into mewling babies. That's what microaggression culture is designed to do. So microaggressions, as you all know, because most of you are college students, microaggressions are this idiotic notion that if someone says something to you that you find insulting, mind you, it doesn't have to actually be insulting, but you find it insulting, subjectively. Right? If you find it insulting, then you have been microaggressed. Something deeply evil has been done to you, and you have every right to be upset and angry and blame the system and cry about it. Right? That's what and we have to ban them. We have to do everything we can to wipe that out of people. We have to have diversity training so that people must never speak. We become like a monastery from the 14th century. You just sit around and you stare at each other. But it's all pretty because it's ethnically diverse, but it's really quiet. That's what microaggression culture is designed to do. These small actions or word choices, as Jonathan Haidt over at The Atlantic says, that seem on their face to have no malicious intent, but that are thought of as a kind of violence nonetheless. Now, what's dangerous about this is not just the attempt to silence, it's the language itself. So microaggression is not just something insulting. When I was growing up, we didn't have this stupidity. I'm not that much older than you guys, but we didn't have this stupidity even 10 years before you were born. We just used to call it an insult. And then we were told to grow up because people insult each other. But the microaggression language is different, because microaggression language suggests that there is an actual aggression taking place. Something aggressive has been done to you. Never mind that it wasn't purposeful. Never mind it wasn't even accident. Never mind maybe never even happened. The bottom line is something aggressive has been done to you. And you know what aggression calls for? It calls for an aggressive response. It calls for you to shut down debate. It calls for you to storm stages. It calls for you to get violent with people. And so things that are completely and utterly anodyne, right? If you say something like, I'm colorblind to somebody, this is a microaggression, because how could you not acknowledge your own white privilege? I'm colorblind actually means you're racist, right? If you use he and she, right, this is offensive to transgender people because you're not using made-up words like she and gjubi, right? These are microaggressions, because even if you legitimately didn't know the sex of the person you're talking to, or you did know the sex, but you didn't know what, like you're meeting the person for the first time, you have no idea what in their own mind they are. If you do that, then it's a microaggression on a cosmic scale, and this calls for aggression. Now, and this has actually resulted in violence, not just in attempts to shut down speeches, you know, by somebody who I really dislike but has every right to speak, Milo Yiannopoulos at Berkeley, or attempts to shut me down at DePaul University or at University of Wisconsin or at Cal State LA. It's getting to the point where it's bleeding up from the university level higher up into sort of the leftist group.
About those statues.
Oh no, I fully understand that. If I were a black taxpayer, I wouldn't want to pay for the upkeep on these statues either. Yeah. I mean, I get it. I totally get that. And listen, all I'm saying is that it's a local issue.
I think I'm the only person on the left, on the so-called left, who hasn't spoken tonight about this. First of all, with respect to Alice and John and everyone, this is not a local issue. This is an issue about America's history, a national history that affected millions of Americans. 600,000 people died in the Civil War. It was the bloodiest war in American history. 50,000 people died at Gettysburg, 20,000 at Vicksburg, 20,000 at Antietam. We can't celebrate the history of a man named Robert E. Lee or Jefferson Davis who took up arms against the United States of America. I don't know where everybody else draws the line, but I can draw the line there. You can distinguish. It is very possible to distinguish what Robert E. Lee did and what Jefferson Davis and Stonewall Jackson did from what Thomas Jefferson and George Washington did. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, though they were slave owners, never took up arms against the United States of America. And for a president of the, it is treason. And for a president of the United States in 2017 to endorse treasonous, traitors, murderous, racist, and to celebrate that is unacceptable. And anyone who stands up in favor of that is, in my opinion, is not respecting the true culture of what America is supposed to represent.
All right, I've got to get to the break. So, but also we're going to talk about this because a Missouri lawmaker is saying that she hopes Donald Trump is assassinated. So I'm back now with my panel, and yes, we talked about all of this during the break, all of us here. But I want to move on now and talk about a Democratic Missouri state senator from the University City posted that, this is in St. Louis, posted and then quickly deleted this Facebook thing saying she hoped that President Trump would be assassinated. Senator Marie Chappelle Nadal, she came to prominence during the whole Ferguson and Michael Brown situation. She quickly took it down. The U.S. Secret Service and in the St. Louis field office investigating, and both Senator Claire McCaskill and the chairman of the Missouri Democratic Party have called on her to resign. What do you say?
There's no excuse for that. There's no reason for that. Clearly, this is an emotional issue. Clearly, when this started over the weekend, we could see things bubbling over. Unfortunately, I think the president from the get-go didn't handle this correctly with regard to not coming out completely unequivocally denouncing hatred and bigotry and racism, and he dropped the ball. But what that has done, that has created a ripple effect of emotions and conversations and discussions, and this is where we are today.
Yeah. Look, the president should own his own words. He's responsible for his words. And she said, the way I responded this morning was wrong. She told the Star, I guess the newspaper, I am frustrated. Did I mean the statement? No, I am frustrated. Absolutely. The president is causing damage. He's causing hate. She should be responsible for her words like the president's responsible. Well,
at least, and I don't in any way think what she said was right, but at least she had the courage to say she was wrong. This president never says he was wrong. This is a president who got up there last year during the campaign.
But you're not making excuses for her.
I'm not making excuses for her, but I'm saying this is a president who got up there last year during the campaign and spoke about Second Amendment remedies in case Hillary Clinton was elected, which was a clear threat of assassination.
But
he never admitted he was
I understand
wrong.
that, but this is whataboutism. Yes, you're right about all that, but still, she's...
No, you're right. It's wrong. You can't say anything other than it's wrong. We could just end the conversation there. But the point is, Donald Trump is the president of the United States. He's supposed to be not only the political leader, but also a moral leader of the country. He cannot do that. He can't condemn other people when he's creating the culture of violence himself.
What do you say to this, Ben?
You know, I think that when it comes to the culture of violence, this is something where we really have to be careful, and I think we all should agree on this. This is pretty obvious stuff. You don't call for people's assassination. Right. I think that there are groups like Antifa out there that are violent. Forget Charlottesville. They're violent in other places like Sacramento. They've been violent in Berkeley. Violence in our political discourse is not a thing that should be happening, nor should it be incited or forwarded. But I think that we have to be very careful about distinguishing between actual insightful language, like what we're talking about here. I mean, the Secret Service is now investigating this, and just nasty language. I think President Trump says some really nasty, terrible things. You know, at the point when he actually calls for violence, I condemned him, and I will condemn him again. I think that in this case, what we're talking about is something much more explicit than anything Trump has said so far, obviously.
Yeah, I've got to run. I'm sorry, everyone doesn't get to talk. John, just a segment. You talked a lot last segment. Thank you.
Sure did.
How much stronger is the religious persecution on leftist campuses?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to be a religious person on campus. I'll answer the second question first. It's easier to be. It's not easy to be a religious person on campuses because you're perceived as stupid. I mean, the nice thing is if you do, you know, once you go to Harvard Law School, they can't say that anymore. But but you get that a lot, right? It's the idea that you're a dummy for believing in religion. And the truth is, all of Western civilization is based on a Judeo-Christian value system. It hasn't sprung up anywhere else. I mean, there are tons of cultures all over the globe, and none of them have the kind of civilization America does. And America, by the way, is still significantly more religious than Europe, which is not coincidentally one of the reasons why we are significantly more powerful than Europe. So, you know, when they say that you know, you're a fool for believing in God, the truth is that belief in God is belief. Right? You have to take a leap of faith. It can't be proved. It can't be something. It's not something that you can make a scientific hypothesis and then fulfill that hypothesis. But atheism can't be proved either. And there's no way to prove these sorts of intangibles. And what that means is that you can either choose to at least acknowledge. What I would say to people is, look, whether you believe in God personally is your own business. It is. I don't really care particularly. As a religious person, I care about your soul. But as a political person, it's your own business. I don't care. But as a society, when we fail to acknowledge the value of Judeo-Christian religion steeped in the idea that every human being has equal worth under God, you end up very quickly devolving into a socialism that ends up demeaning human beings individually. Because there's never been a place on earth that wasn't like that. The fact is that the collective takes over. People worship. People are made to worship. And we will either worship God or we will worship the state. Or we'll worship ourselves. Right? Those tend to be the three choices. You're either a libertine, or you're a communist, or you're a conservative. Those are sort of the three choices. So, you know, I think that when it comes to defending religion, it's easier to defend the system of religion than particular religious belief because we all have different religions, we all have different religious beliefs. Even among Orthodox Jews, there's a lot of diversity of each individual has their own relationship with God, and you can't argue anybody else into your relationship with God. What you can say is, here is something that is unquestioned and undoubted. Judeo-Christian religion has created the foundation for the greatest civilization in the history of mankind, and ripping away the foundations of that civilization on behalf of a philosophy that really has never built anything without those roots in Judeo-Christian. Atheism, modern atheism, has its root in Judeo-Christian religion. It does. It doesn't exist in the Islamic world, right? Modern atheism, the freedom to be an atheist, only exists in the West. It only exists in the Judeo-Christian world. The freedoms that the left bases its whole worldview on are within a milieu that was created by a religion it despises. You can't just take a battering ram to the foundations of civilization and hope the superstructure stands. So that's my answer as far as God.
For introducing me to Harambe memes.
Well, that's his memory.
Last week, John Oliver used his show as a call to arms to support Planned Parenthood because Republicans have the House, the Senate, the White House. Do you anticipate pushback within the Republican Party if the pro-life movement tries to move forward with its agenda in the next 2 years?
I mean, this is a really good question. I'm not sure how committed Donald Trump is to, for example, reversing funding for Planned Parenthood, right? He said early in the primaries that he liked Planned Parenthood. He thought that they did some good work. It'll be interesting to see if he clashes with the new Congress over that, because clearly Paul Ryan and a lot of other members of Congress would like to withdraw federal funding for Planned Parenthood. Obviously, I think that's a good idea. I think abortion is immoral, and the idea that I'm paying for somebody else's baby to be killed seems pretty ridiculous, morally, ethically, legally to me. I think all of it's really dubious. It is definitely questionable. As far as John Oliver, we have a really bad habit in this country of taking everybody seriously if they have a British accent. And that seems to me a bad mistake. We ought to judge John Oliver by the content of his speech, not the quality thereof.
I think that you have to acknowledge the reality, regardless of which end of the ideological spectrum you're on, that this idea that the relationship between a corporation and a worker is an entirely voluntary one is a figment of our imagination. The reality is that the relationship depends upon the balance of power. Because if you were to really believe that it's totally a voluntary relationship, then you should be arguing for child labor, because that was legal at one time, and that was argued as a beneficial thing for the economy. So we have to understand that it's a balance of power.
We're moving ever so slightly away from whether we need customers with more money to have that that base, but we'll be addressing some of the underage working here shortly. Ben,
yeah, I mean, I'll refrain from talking about child labor, especially given the fact that the rationale for child labor laws is that children are incapable of consent, right? I mean, that's the rationale for child labor laws.
Although your child did appear on television last night.
She did, without her consent, but I will tell you that she immediately joined SAG-AFTRA.
The rationale for child labor to be legal was that children are exploitable, more exploitable. That's why businesses wanted it, and people had to fight against it.
Isn't it businesses may want it, but the fact is that the children are not capable of consent, which is why the legislation was appropriate from all ideological points of view. In terms of whether basically this trickle-up economics, this idea that if you pay people $15 an hour, it will help the general economy, it's evidencing a differential point of view with regard to how money is invested and what makes your life as a consumer better. The truth is that Mother Teresa did less good for the world than Bill Gates, as a general matter. Because more people gained their jobs through Bill Gates, more people have a product that Bill Gates created, more people's lives have been bettered through Bill Gates. Mother Teresa did a lot of wonderful things. But the reality of the situation is that what makes your life better than people's lives were 50 years ago is all the new products and services developed by all the rich people who hire you. All of you out there who I'm sure are not rich, are you working for a poor person right now? Who is hiring you? Who's paying your salary? Unless you're working for the government, and even then you're not working for a poor person, you're paying for the rich people who actually pay the taxes that pay for you to work for the government. So this idea that economic growth is a function of people making $15 an hour versus $14 an hour is simply not true. The reality of the situation is that what makes the economy grow is new products and services that make your life better and which require millions of dollars in research and development. And as far as the point that was made about the salary of the CEO of Walmart, all I can say is this. Walmart has approximately, they're the biggest employer in the country. They have something on the order of 2 million employees across the country. Let's say we agree that 20 million is too much. And let's say that we cut that salary to zero. Great, we just gave everybody $10, right, for the year. So let's stop pretending that the vast wealth imbalance inside Walmart is causing poverty for people at the bottom. It repeatedly on your show. I watch your show, and I've seen it repeatedly. What you tend to do is you tend to demonize people who differ from you politically by standing on the graves of the children of Sandy Hook, saying they don't seem to care enough about the dead kids. If they cared more about the dead kids, they would agree with you on policy. I think we can have a rational political conversation about balancing rights and risks and rewards of all of these different policies, but I don't think that what we need to do is demonize people on the other side as being unfeeling about what happened in Sandy Hook.
How dare you accuse me of standing on the graves of the children that died there? How dare you?
I've seen you do it repeatedly, Piers.
Like I say, how dare you?
Well, I mean, you can keep saying that, but you've done it repeatedly. What you do, and I've seen you do it on the program, is you keep saying to folks that if they disagree with you politically, then somehow this is a violation of what happened in Sandy Hook. And you have yet, I'd really like to hear your policy prescriptions for what we should do about guns. Because you say that you respect the Second Amendment, and, you know, I brought this here for you so that you can read it. It's the Constitution. And I would really like for you to explain to me what you would do about guns that would have prevented what happened in Sandy Hook. If you want to do what you did in the UK, right, which is ban virtually all guns, that is at least a fair argument. And we can have a discussion about whether that's something that we ought to do or not.
I've made it very clear what I want to do, which is exactly what Mark Kelly wants to do. And in fact, rather than address
let's talk about that.
Rather than address your comments to me about standing on the graves of children at Sandy Hook, you can address them to Mark Kelly, because he agrees with everything that I've been saying, because he feels the same way, as does his wife. They're gun owners. They both respect the Second Amendment of the Constitution. They don't want to take away anybody's right to defend themselves with guns.
Well, they want to take away certain types of guns, obviously.
They want to take away assault weapons, which are capable, with magazines like we saw at Aurora and Sandy Hook, of unleashing a ridiculous amount of bullets.
Well, this is a question I wanted to ask you, Piers, because I've seen you talk about assault weapons a lot, and I've seen Mark Kelly talk about assault weapons. The vast majority of murders in this country that are committed with guns are not committed with assault weapons, they're committed with handguns. Okay, so are you willing to ban handguns in this country across the country?
No, that's not what I'm asking for.
Why not?
Let me ask you...
Don't you care about the kids who are being killed in Chicago as much as the kids in Sandy Hook?
Yes, I do.
Then why don't you care about banning the handguns in Chicago?
We'll come to that. Let me ask you this. What was the weapon used at Aurora in the movie theater?
It was an assault rifle, sure.
Okay. What was the weapon used in the Oregon shopping mall?
I believe it was an assault rifle, correct?
Okay. What was the weapon used at Sandy Hook?
It was an assault rifle.
What was the weapon used at the incident around Christmas when the firemen were lured to their deaths, the New York State firemen?
And bought illegally. That was an assault rifle.
Right, so the last 4 mass shootings in America were all the assault rifles.
And the vast
that is the reason, Mr. Shapiro. And you can smirk at me, and you can laugh at me.
I'm not smirking.
And you can accuse me of standing on the graves of dead children.
And being a bully, yes.
But that is the reason that people like me and Mark Kelly and Gabrielle Giffords want to have assault weapons like that removed from civilian hands.
Your passion on the issue doesn't really justify the rationale for why you want to ban assault weapons, but not handguns.
You don't understand why we want to remove the preferred weapon of choice, these killing machines,
well, I would like
from
you
the hands of deranged young men.
All I'm asking is for you to be philosophically consistent. If what you're worried about is the removal of killing machines from the hands of deranged young people, then maybe we should talk about a blanket gun ban. And let's get to what the left really wants here. And you say that you're for the Second Amendment.
Why is it about left or right? Because in Britain this never is about left or right, this issue. Why is it here?
Well, we can talk about Britain in a second. I think the reason that it's about left and right here is because fundamentally the right believes that the basis for the Second Amendment, and they believe in the Second Amendment, the basis for the Second Amendment is not really about self-defense and it's not about hunting. It is about resistance to government tyranny. That's what the founders said, and that's what the right believes in this country.
Which tyranny are you fearing yourself?
I fear the possibility of a tyranny rising in this country in the next 50 to 100 years. Let me tell you something, Piers. The fact that my grandparents and great-grandparents in Europe didn't fear that is why they are now ashes in Europe. So this kind of leftist revisionist history, where there's never any fear of democracy going usurpacious or tyrannical, is just that. It is fictitious.
Just to clarify your position then, the answer to Sandy Hook, as it was to Aurora, as it was to Gabrielle Giffords, as it was to Columbine and Virginia Tech, is you do nothing. Is that your...
Breitbart.com. Ben, what do you make of this interview? You think that it's a milestone, or that we in the media are simply just doing a setup?
I'm happy for Michael Sam because he's being who he wants to be, and that's wonderful. I do think that the media is overblowing it because the media has a particular purpose here, and that is anytime the media senses a milestone, the milestone is directed against people who don't exist, namely this great vast number of people apparently who hate Michael Sam and hate gay people. I don't think America is a homophobic place. I don't think that Michael Sam is going to see much difficulty in the NFL. In fact, I think the NFL is already celebrating him, and I think that the vast majority of the American people look at this and they do exactly what they're supposed to do. They shrug and they say, I hope he's a great football player.
But don't you think the NFL is a homophobic place? They don't even have just one openly gay player.
Well, how about this? How about we identify the actual individual homophobes within the NFL and then we all condemn them as opposed to worrying about an institutional bias that nobody seems to be able to actually document.
But do you think the NFL is ready for this?
I think the NFL is absolutely ready for this. Clearly, Missouri was, and Missouri isn't exactly the main state college of liberal arts. I mean, Missouri is a very red area of the United States, and his teammates on the campus obviously didn't think it was a big deal. I think it'll be fine for him in the NFL, and that's why I like what Michael Sam said. Michael Sam actually said, I don't think this is a big deal or really should be a big deal. I agree with him. I don't understand why the media makes it a big deal, and I'm wondering, after he comes out and after he's accepted, is the media now going to move on to this next, the first gay jockey? Are we going to move on to the next, the first gay hockey player? Because the goal of the media in all of this is to create this bugaboo of the American populace as vastly homophobic, hating gay people, and therefore it is a massive challenge for any gay person in public life to come out. That's simply not true in America in 2014. And when the media portrays it as a great act of heroism for anybody to come out, look, I'm an Orthodox Jew, okay? I wear my yarmulke here on television. That doesn't make me a hero. I don't believe America is an anti-Semitic country. I don't believe that America is an anti-gay country.
Okay, so if it's not a big deal, for instance, Vice President Joe Biden, he just sent a tweet about it, and First Lady Michelle Obama, she said the following, you're an inspiration to all of us. We couldn't be prouder of your courage, both on and off the field. This is not something that you would find every day coming from the First Lady or the Vice President of the United States.
Right, it's politically motivated. The reason that the First Lady and the Vice President of the United States do this is they are implying that there is some sort of vast conspiracy to keep people like Michael Sam out of public life, and that's simply not true. Look, if you want to portray Michael Sam as Jackie Robinson here, then you actually need a Ben Chapman. You need somebody on the other side who's speaking out against Michael Sam and saying it's so terrible that Michael Sam came out of the closet, it's so terrible to have gay people in the NFL. I'm still looking for that human being.
Not precisely a conspiracy, but wouldn't you say that there's a lot of discrimination in this country against gays and lesbians?
I would say overall there's a vastly minute amount of discrimination in this country against gays. The FBI statistics show there are about the same number of attacks on Jews in this country as there are on homosexuals, and this is not a country that discriminates against either Jews or homosexuals. And when we do find somebody who does discriminate against homosexuals, they should be called out by every person of good-hearted intent, as they are in the United States in 2014. This is not 1952.
All right, so let's listen to another voice. Former NFL coach Herman Edwards. He said the following to ESPN. Let's listen.
The thing you talk about in the organization with the GM and obviously the owner is, can we handle this guy? Can we handle the media that's going to come along with his situations? He's bringing baggage into your locker room.
So this kind of talk is real. I mean, we're not making that up. So,
well, yeah, that's exactly right. But there's a difference between saying that he's bringing media baggage in and saying that his sexual orientation is the baggage. Tim Tebow brought a lot of media baggage, too. That's probably why he's not working in the NFL right now. And it is true that because of all this commotion, because of all this hubbub, because Michael Sam chose to reveal his sexual orientation in the New York Times as opposed to going to his teams individually and talking with them, there is going to be an enormous amount of baggage brought into the locker room. But that's a different sort of baggage than the idea that just because he's gay, he's not going to get hired.
So talking about baggage, what do you think is going to happen during the draft? Do you think he's not going to be chosen simply because of what he did in the last 24 hours?
No, I mean, I think that probably there will be some teams that pass on him because they don't want the publicity associated with picking Michael Sam, but I think that he's going to be picked pretty close to where he was going to be picked anyway, because bottom line is, in America in 2014, thank God, this is a meritocracy, and I think that you look at football teams, and if they feel that Michael Sam can play and play well, they'll pick him.
Ben, so you think this is a non-story? I'm thinking of many young students, young players, who are seeing this story today as we speak, and they're just finding the courage to come out, to say, this is who I am.
I think precisely the opposite. I think the more casually we treat people coming out of the closet as opposed to a vast national celebration every time somebody comes out of the closet, that'll make it easier, not harder, for gay people to come out, because they're going to look at the situation and say, look, it's not about me facing discrimination. I don't have to overcome some sort of huge mythical challenge from the quote-unquote right-wing establishment. I can come out when I want, and I can do what I want with my life, and I don't have to face all of this discrimination. The more we play up the idea that there's discrimination, this sort of phantom discrimination, the harder it is for people to come out.
But I'm surprised, Ben, that you're saying that there's no discrimination in this country against gays.
I'm saying that compared to other countries, there is a minute amount of discrimination in this country against gays.
Hey, Ben, thanks so much for talking to us.
Thanks so much.
I really appreciate it.
What's going on, Ben? Love your program. Love all that stuff.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think as kind of a millennial conservative, constitutional conservative, one of the biggest threats and one of the hardest things to respond to from people on the left is when they talk about the utopia of the Nordic countries, because they are oftentimes armed with a lot of facts in regards to the efficiency of their public programs and things to that effect. So how would you recommend responding to those claims of the utopianism of the Nordic countries?
Okay, so the first thing that's important to notice about the Nordic countries is that the Nordic countries are, by and large, extraordinarily ethnically homogenous. So they're not comparable and culturally homogenous as well. So Vermont looks a lot like Norway. Right? Bernie Sanders' philosophy works in Vermont and it works in Norway, but it only works for a temporary period of time because Vermont doesn't have its own defense budget, and really neither does Norway. Right? We've been paying for the Nordic countries' defense budgets for a long time. Also, it's worthwhile noting that the taxes in these countries are extraordinarily high, and the countries are going bankrupt anyway. So for about a 15-year period, 20-year period, the Nordic countries have been experiencing extraordinarily slow growth, which has led them to actually elect more right-wing governments on economics and deregulate their economies, because it turns out people don't like paying twice the amount that it costs for a normal car. Right? The income tax rate in places like Denmark for middle-class people, not for upper-class people, for middle-class people is like 60%. So, it's easy for students to say 60% sounds good, but you all go to Yale, which means that eventually you'll have a job that pays you enough that you'll be paying a high percentage of your income in taxes, and it ain't that much fun. There's a reason that Denmark, all these countries are now turning away from this, and they've been living off the back of America paying for their defense budget for a very long time. So you have the privilege of not having to pay your own defense budget. You also have a group of what can best be described as upper education people who have grown up in Western countries with a particular set of values. And socialism, at least in the Nordic way, not full government ownership of resources, but high redistribution of income, that is capable of lasting for a certain period of time, but even there it collapses.